Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Autumn of Healing Summit. Today, I have the privilege of introducing you to Jane Tara Cacchetti. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Eugenie. Nice to see you, and thank you for inviting me.
It's so lovely to have an opportunity to chat with you again. We spoke a while ago on my podcast, Homeopathy Hangout, and then Matthias and Doris asked me to gather some guests for the Autumn of Healing Summit after the huge success of their Network to Heal Summit last year. And I jumped at the chance to have an opportunity to speak with you again because something like healing trauma and transforming that into vitality is something that I feel that you're one of our experts in. So I'm really happy to have you on.
Thanks, Eugenie. So let's get started then. So, the idea of healing transpersonal trauma is something that's very relevant to these times because we have a lot going on in our environment. A lot of times people have ongoing problems and they'll go from doctor to doctor and no one knows how to help them. So in these cases, it's sometimes necessary to look into transpersonal causes. And transpersonal causes are those things that go beyond the individual ego and encompass the reality of the interconnectedness of all beings. So I'd like to start by defining what I mean by transpersonal trauma and its relationship to the collective unconscious, and how the need for treatment on this level shows up in clinical practice. But after that introduction to the topic, most importantly, I'll show how two persons have gone through this process using their own words. And finally, we'll discuss some lesser used homeopathic remedies that are useful in stimulating the healing of transpersonal trauma. So,
Amazing.
what is transpersonal trauma? We can break it down in many ways, but the way I decided to break it down was through the more common use of it, which we commonly known transpersonal element of trauma, which is trauma that's passed down through generations of family heritage. For instance, if a person has a history of alcoholism, that's known to affect later generations. But a family history, even many generations back, where there has been exposure to suffering, not necessarily ingesting something, but war, genocide, starvation, that trauma can also be passed down, even if the individual hasn't experienced it themselves. Now, another form of trauma would be trauma associated with an individual's ethnic background, their culture. For instance, a history of slavery, of oppression, of mass incarceration. And then finally, an area that is less understood, which is the archetypal realm of trauma. And this is trauma that's associated with particular times. In other words, the archetypal energy or the zeitgeist of the time. And this stress belongs to a core issue that's shared by all of humanity. But there are some people who are absorbing it more and develop symptoms from it. So in times of great change, such as our present era, the archetypal energy is constellated and pushes people to make radical change. So people who are sensitive to this archetypal level also being pushed to radical change. So it's not all negative. It's actually a very positive thing in many ways. And to tell you the truth, none of us really want to make those radical changes because they're super uncomfortable.
Yep, super uncomfortable, but very necessary.
But necessary, and we'll get pushed and pushed and pushed until we make it. Anyway, however, we know as homeopaths whether or not something deeply affects an individual depends on their particular sensitivity. So not everyone who has these traumas in their history, which is, to tell you the truth, most of us, not everyone will develop symptoms. So let's move on to studying and exploring the collective unconscious before we go any further into this. So, the collective unconscious was first used in clinical practice by psychologist Carl Jung. And he discovered this very early in his life when he was working in a mental hospital, working with psychotic individuals, many of whom had never left the hospital. However, he discovered that they were having dreams and visions and fantasies that there was no way they could have known them. They were mythological motifs, ideas that Jung knew about, but these people couldn't know about it. And after seeing this again and again, he realized that they were tapping into a collective unconscious. And this is where he first developed his ideas of the collective unconscious through clinical observation. It wasn't something he made up or read in a book. It was clinical observation. And that's very important to understand that because we as homeopaths work with clinical observation. So he also realized that healing often required the individual to go beyond the personal aspect of their psyche and into the realm of the collective unconscious. Now, the idea of the interconnectedness of life didn't start with Jung. It's something that existed and has been an essential part of both Western and Eastern religious and philosophical life. But it was Jung who, as a psychiatrist, brought the reality of this into clinical practice. Now, Jung continued to develop this understanding of the collective unconscious until his death in 1961, and his ideas continue to be of use. But now we can add to that research that has been done in epigenetics. So I'll just mention this briefly because I'm not an expert in this, but it's fascinating research, especially fascinating for those of us who are homeopaths. So the research has shown that a family history of trauma changes the way the body and mind access DNA. So people talk about changes to the DNA. The DNA actually doesn't change, but the way we access it changes. Of course, that completely colors our reality. And much of this research was done on groups of people with a family history of severe trauma, family history of experience of the Holocaust, particularly. There was a lot done on that, genocide, war, and changes in the way DNA is accessed is seen even in those who did not directly experience the trauma. It can go back many generations. And what's interesting is the research showed a propensity towards certain physical diseases, particularly cancer, as well as mental and emotional problems. What's more difficult to research is the result of trauma that's experienced through being within proximity of a horrifying or extremely stressful event, or even hearing about it. Now, we have a unique situation these days. In the past, depending how far back you go, it took a long time to find out what was happening in a war somewhere or other. Now we have immediate access to all of the traumas. We're continually bombarded with all of the horrific things that are happening in the world. So, for example, on 9/11, the attacks on the World Trade Center in New York City, not only were people there, but people all over the world heard about it and were affected by it. And geneticists now know that the genome or genetic material is highly responsive to the environment. So we hear those things, we are continually responding to it. This means that exposure to outside events can modify the way the genome expresses itself.
That's profound.
It is, and we've got a lot on our plate when we start to try to help people. So therefore, the term transpersonal rather than simply transgenerational trauma is more useful in exploring this subject, at least in my opinion. The trauma doesn't have to be in the ancestral lineage of an individual. Simply being sensitive to the stresses of the environment can cause transpersonal trauma and changes in the way we access our DNA, causing mental, emotional, and physical symptoms. So there are several categories of situations that may call for transpersonal healing. The first is a primary problem that can only be solved on a transpersonal level. In other words, a person comes to you for healing or goes to a homeopath, or maybe you yourself go to a homeopath for healing, but the primary problem can only be solved on a transpersonal level. The chief complaint could be physical or emotional, it doesn't really matter. But there's often an ambiguous diagnosis or multiple diagnoses given by various practitioners and healthcare providers. And multiple forms of well-indicated remedies and therapies have failed to change the problem. There's often a theme or inexplicable fear that dominates dreams or thoughts that seem unrelated to the individual's life. And this theme is sometimes present from childhood. So that's the first category that you may see. This person may come to you and there's this problem to start with. The second is transpersonal issues emerge during therapy and block further progress. This I've seen quite often because we treat someone and that first layer comes off, and then suddenly this underlying problem emerges. The person's doing well, and then we can't find a remedy, and progress is halted. The remedy that worked no longer works. We try all different things, and nothing is happening. But then a theme will emerge in dreams or begins to dominate the inner dialogue of the individual. Along with this, new physical symptoms may arise, and the physical symptoms will sometimes give us a greater clue to what's going on or complement this theme that's emerging. And also, conflicts can arise or increase with family members, friends, or loved ones. Unusual people can come into their lives or whatever, creating a problem that's somehow related with this to this new theme that's arising. So this inner outer relationship, which we'll talk about further, is activated. And then particularly the other world events or environmental issues affect the individual and bring forth symptoms. World events have a very strong effect on the individual, and their health can be compromised by the fact of these events. Hearing news about them, which again, I said we hear a lot of news about them creates despair or depression or extreme anger. So, this is my introduction. Let's see how this unfolds in an individual. This is really where the rubber hits the road, right?
Beautiful.
Okay. This first case is a 44-year-old woman. She's a CEO of an international organization, and she comes to me for burnout. She's thinking of giving up her position altogether because she's so exhausted. She's downsized her job. She's quit working for a large firm and doesn't have any energy any longer. She's working a very stressful, male-dominated field, but now she works on her own with one partner. She's been an overachiever since childhood. She was a semi-professional pianist as a child, and she speaks 5 languages. To this day, she feels oppressed by the strictness and patriarchy of her family. So I give her aurum muriaticum, and she does really well on this for over a year. Her energy returns. She's now working at another firm where she's a part of a very important international project. She feels she's becoming more wise and more mature in her communications. So she's very happy with the result. But then a new theme emerges. And this goes on for several consults. And the aurum muriaticum is not helping. She says, I've been concerned about Armenian genocide since childhood. It weighs on me. Both my parents were orphans who were survivors of the genocide. And in school, they would recite poems on the genocide. I give her Boswellia serrata, which is frankincense in a 30C. Let's see what happens. After 2 months, she says, and these are her own words, I'm entering a new phase. I'm speaking my truth more, connecting with my true self. I feel more feminine. So, in the first 2 months, what we're seeing is the beginning of healing and transformation. She's connecting with a deeper aspect of herself. By month 4, she said, I had 2 meetings with Turkish people, one initiated by me. I would never have done this before, as the Turks committed the genocide. It all went very well. We had learned to hate the Turks, to see them as barbarians. So now at 4 months, you see a deeper transformation. That's which was hated and deemed as separate is coming together. The polarity that was caused by the trauma is beginning to heal, and the separateness is transforming into acceptance and unity. And then her beautiful words. This is a reminder that we are all connected on a human level. Resentment doesn't help, sharing information does, objective information.
That's beautiful. And when a client offers you words like that, you just know, like, we just do the best job in the world.
She's an amazing woman,
Oh,
really. And she was very happy to share this because she felt that sharing this not only shows the capacity for healing with homeopathy, but also brings awareness to the Armenian genocide, which is less known than, say, the Jewish genocide. Again, for the 4th month, I never thought this day would come for me. I've carried this pain since childhood. I always wondered why the pain was so huge. This is the pain of the genocide. Now I can look the genocide in the eye. So here is the ability to actually be with the reality of the pain without having to actually carry it.
wow. You've just brought something up for me.
Uh,
Sharing that. That's beautiful.
so month 10, she's not finished yet. Now she looks deeper into the original trauma. She said, I read a novel about the Armenian genocide. You can feel this woman's courage also in what she's doing. I mean, we give remedies to people, but the people have to do the work. And
Yeah.
she's very courageous. I read a novel about the Armenian genocide. It shook me to the core. Until recently, I couldn't even touch a book like that. I felt I was honoring my ancestors and those who had suffered. I think I can finally understand my parents' pain. We now have a common bond of this pain. I now see the genocide as a piece of Armenian history. My culture is more than just that tragedy. So here we have a connection to her ancestry, not just based on trauma. So she's actually able to, this is a very deep connection. First, remember, she started out connection with herself, with her feminine nature, and now she connects actually with her ancestral energy, something that was only pain for her. My culture is more than just a tragedy.
Beautiful.
So now let's see a case addressing a more acute case of transpersonal trauma and one that is very relevant to these times. This is a woman who has been very affected by the Israeli Gaza conflict. She's 77 years old, and she first comes to me with post viral symptoms. She's an herbalist and political activist and worked on hunger projects. Her main remedy was Natrum muriaticum, which she did quite well on. And then her world really fell apart. November 2023, the Israeli Gaza conflict. The world is blown apart, and I'm not doing well. I'm very anxious and agitated. I'm concerned about my family in Israel, all of the Jews in Israel, their blood family. Also, there's a huge split between progressive organizations. This happened in the United States. There were many people who were pro Palestinian, many people pro Israel. There were problems on campuses, but she's very affected by this. And she says, there's a sense of separation. I feel this separation very deeply. I keep looking for a place to have heart conversations, but I can't find any. I've seen a lot of this in general. The world has been affected by this horror. But as I mentioned before, those with a particular sensitivity or resonance to it can develop symptoms. And these sensitive people are like the canaries in a coal mine. They are more sensitive than most to the archetypal energies of the times. But make no mistake, we are all affected. And she's especially disturbed by the feeling of separation and lack of communication, which is a theme of Boswellia. So I give her Boswellia. Well, the first change that we see is in a dream. And she says, I handed over the production of a play to the actors and left. It's an interesting dream, right? So, what she's doing is she's given over individual control of the play to the collective. And this is an important part of individuation, to have the individual ego be of service to a more transpersonal ego, what Jung called the self. So you see, oh, okay, this is starting, at least in this area, in this acute for her. She said, my heart is more open. I'm feeling more than I used to feeling. So this is very interesting. Within the horror of it, within the overwhelm, her heart opens and she's feeling, which is very interesting. And she says it's not about what side they are on, it's how they feel and are affected. This is the only solution to a problem like this. Problem isn't about one side or another. And here we have an individual making that change within herself. There's a big sense of deconstruction, a liminal space. People, ideas, something in myself is reconstructing itself.
Wow.
And that's what has to happen.
I love it when you give a client a remedy and they come up with these. It's like magic. This is the part I always say to my clients. This is the part when they ask me, what will happen when I take this homeopathic remedy? This is the type of stuff that you can't describe to them will happen. Like, how do you
Yes.
describe to somebody that this is possibly that what you might feel?
We let them
You
feel it, right?
exactly. I had a heroin case this week as well. The parents of big heroin users. I gave her a heroin and had the follow up this week. And it was also the same. She's feeling, she's like understanding why her parents did it and feeling for the first time everything was numb and all this. And I'm like, that's the thing that I couldn't warn you that the remedy was going to do. And she's just like so elated. She's like, I don't want to stop taking this remedy. I'm like, it's fine. We can keep it for a little bit longer. But it's so beautiful. It's so satisfying when somebody comes to you and the penny is dropped for them on that level. Sorry, Jane. I just love
That's
reading
fine.
cases like I love hearing this. I love that we can do that for people with something that's got nothing in it. It's just energy medicine. So beautiful.
You know, in my opinion is it's better not to give people too much information about what happens because we might limit what happens. And it really, there's this sense of all possibilities when we give a homeopathic remedy.
I don't want to interrupt your talk because you've got such a beautiful flow, but I have one little question I just want to insert here is with your Jungian psychology background, do you think you could achieve this realization this quickly with just going to see a Jungian analyst without having a remedy, or do you think it's essential to have the two together?
Well, I think that there's always an interaction between the homeopath and the client. There's a transference, counter-transference. If you go to the store and you talk to the person at the cash registers, there's transference. So in something so intimate as homeopathy, of course, there's going to be a change. And one of the reasons that I'm teaching this today is the more we know, the more that person's psyche can rely on us. The
Hmm.
more we know, the more we can help them, not by necessarily telling them what's going to happen or giving them advice. As a matter of fact, I don't think that's a good idea. But the knowing, their psyche knows that. And so there's a kind of confidence that happens. Because here, this big sense of deconstruction, for instance, she tells me that that's completely, those are her words. I don't guide her in that or anything. She has that experience. But actually, we know in Jungian psychology that the small ego sense has to break up into this larger reality. And this is very tricky sometimes because some people can't make this transition. They just can't do it. So there needs to be enough strength. My sense after practicing homeopathy for almost 40 years is that our remedies don't push people beyond what they can tolerate, especially if we're careful. These cases, I'm treating with a 30C. This
Wow.
is not any big 1M, 10M business. After 3 months, her moods are more stable. Emotions are moving through me and not sticking. So she's not stuck. She's not focusing on the problems. There, she has the emotions and they're not sticking. We saw that starting when her heart opened and she was feeling more. So people don't feel less like they're taking some kind of antidepressant or something. They actually can feel more. They can feel the wholeness of all of their emotions, but not be harmed by them when their remedy has really helped them. And then she said, my dreams have changed. Instead of just me, I'm in a group project, you see? She's working within the collective. Many parts of the psyche that were polarized are now working together. She said, I'm working on a group project, including Black colleagues of mine. And then she says, I'm having an ongoing conversation with a Muslim man. And remember, she's Jewish. The conversations are very enlivening and interesting. We speak on Zoom about peace prayers, and we answer questions like, what offends you? This is like in the first case that you saw, that which changes internally is experienced in the outside world of the individual.
I'm so grateful that you've got these cases to illustrate this for us because it really just brings it home.
Let's talk about this remedy a little bit, frankincense. It's been in our Materia Medica for a while. There have been several provings of it, and we'll see it in our Materia Medicas, Boswellia serrata mainly, and also Olibanum sacrum.
Olibanum is the sap that comes from Boswellia, I think.
They're all the
Oh,
sap. Yeah,
I
yeah.
assume Boswellia
I
was
don't
from
know
the
why there's so
tree.
many different names, but it's
Okay.
all the sap. The key active ingredient is boswellic acid, which is interesting. It's been found to have anti-inflammatory and anti-arthritic effects. It's also been shown to have anti-tumor effects in cancer cells. And the boswellic acid is found in the resin, which is what we have in the homeopathic remedy, but not in the essential oils. So in 2021, during the pandemic, I participated in a reproving of frankincense. And I have a little map here to show you. The gold dots are where the provers were. So there's me in the United States.
Yeah.
There was one of my colleagues in the UK, and quite a few people in Vienna, in Austria, and one person in Bulgaria. And what we did is we did all different types of frankincense, the Boswellia sacra, the Boswellia serrata, and we did different types of provings, meditation proving, trituration provings, and then the standard taking the remedies. What was interesting is the results were consistent no matter which variety we used or what type of proving. And also, many of the ideas that came through, many of the symptoms that we saw, and many of the dreams were consistent with other provings, but we had some new ideas that came up. And of course, this was during the pandemic, so we were all on Zoom and by email, but our results were consistent. And not only that, there was this incredible feeling of connection between the provers. It was just like we all still, when we get together and we talk about this proving, we go, oh, the proving, so great. I still burn the burn frankincense.
Oh,
And by the way, you can do that. If you want to get some of the results and you don't want to go all the way into taking a remedy, burning some good frankincense resin will really be helpful because it's a really helpful remedy for the time, the separation of the time. So let's see what came out. Here are the main symptoms that came out in our proving: oppression in the name of religion, genocide, concentration camps, abuse of institutions and ideologies, abuse of powers. That was abuse of power came through all provings. religious rigidity and fundamentalist thinking. I think you and I talked a little bit about that fundamentalist thinking part of it a while back. Connection and separation. And you see this in these people, right? You
Mhm.
see how they took separation and made connection. Integration between the individual and the collective, transformation, transmutation, and connection with nature and animals, especially trees. There was a lot more, but this is not a lecture on materia medica, so you get the idea, and this is enough to actually consider the remedy. One of the things that we did is we did drawings.
Oh,
And this is my
wow.
drawing, my experience of the oppression of others in the name of religion and belief, the heart of darkness overlaying the heart of light. And we can see that somehow in these, I think I can anyway, in the cases that I presented. The
Mm.
darkness was lifted and the heart of light was revealed. So,
This sounds like one of those remedies once again. I joking, half jokingly say every now and again when I see a remedy like this, that we should get those agricultural spray planes and put the remedy on that and just like spray it over the land or just drop it in the water because it sounds like such a deeply healing remedy. And if more of us can put our ego aside and connect with the bigger picture, I think so much deep healing can happen. And instead of really focusing on our own egoic suffering, really just seeing the bigger picture, I think, and
yeah,
having open conversations with each other, like a Muslim and a Jew, being able to talk about things that trigger them or things that upset them, or we should be able to have those conversations in an open and loving way.
yeah, it's a very important remedy for these times where there's so much polarity, there's so much separation. Interestingly, it's a remedy for post-viral
Mm,
infections. And if you look in our repertories, like some of the modern repertories, you'll see it. So, yeah, it's a remedy that was, in my estimation, addressing issues of separation and lack of connection and polarity that was underlying the collective unconscious. It was like part of that was part of the archetypal energy
mm.
before the pandemic. And then the pandemic made it even worse, where we actually had to, they told everybody we had to be separate. But that energy was there beforehand, in my estimation. So, how to find indications of transpersonal trauma? A big way is through dreams. We saw that in dreams, the dreams of the second woman, repetitive dreams, especially, and nightmares, unusual dreams, most significant when repeated, and a strong dream remembered from childhood, or dreams that suddenly come up during homeopathic treatment. But some people actually come in with these kind of dreams, and you go, where is this dream coming from? What does this mean? And we can ask the person what it means, and they don't know what it means, but there's something there. And then tendencies, repetitive concerns, hobbies. Some people have really strange hobbies. You've probably seen this. I go, why is a person attracted to this?
Taxidermy.
Why are they doing that? But sometimes, if you put that together with a dream, sometimes it'll start to make sense. Connections to war and genocide in particular countries, disasters, that you can't explain them at all, and the person can't explain them, but they're there. And then their ancestry. Some people actually know this, and that'll be part of it. Ancestral heritage, where there are a lot of wars, people dying in wars, incarceration, suicide. So, this is why it's important to get as complete a family history as possible. It's not only what the physical state is, what the parents died of and how long they lived and all of that, but what was their situation? Oh, were they starving to death in some strange country or something? This is all very important. Those things will be indications of transpersonal trauma, and it might not be something that needs to be treated right away, but something that you could have as information if this problem comes up. So, other remedies to consider. I'll go through this quickly, but don't worry, I'm going to send you a PDF with this information on it. Okay? So, hydrocyanic acid. Now, There's a very interesting, and this is in the PDF, there's a link to Deborah Collins's work on hydrocyanic acid, which is very, very interesting. This is what was used in the death camps. So the person may have many dreams of being killed in concentration camps, witnessing the death of others, a psychological alignment to the Jewish Holocaust, fears of self and others being exterminated, underlying depression centered through thoughts of the Holocaust. And I'll add something else here, which is there's this connection with the Holocaust, but also a feeling of disconnection or disassociation, or when they look into themselves, they can't find anything. And that's what happened to people who were administered hydrocyanic acid. They actually just went blank. So, in a way, it was, they didn't suffer that much. So, Lactodectrus mactans, which is black widow spider, this is a family history of witnessing death, wars, insurrections, tremendous anxiety with great agitation and fear of death, never well since witnessing a violent death or an accident. Somebody sees an accident and people dying and bleeding and all of that. And the feeling that time is running out. The black widow spider has an hourglass on her back. She's a black spider with a red hourglass. And so there's that feeling time is running out. And then finally, now, by the way, there are many other remedies to consider, but these are just some lesser known ones that I'm sharing with you. Diospyros kaki, which is the persimmon tree that survived the bombing at Nagasaki.
Oh, wow.
And the themes there would be that father is absent because he was in a war, or a family history of this absence, and dreams, fears, and fantasies about nuclear war, and family history or psychic connection with nuclear war, and also with Hiroshima. So, again, I'm going to send you information with this on a PDF of these remedies and the link to Deborah Collins's wonderful article
Thank
on
you.
hydrocyanic acid. So, I wanted to end with a quote from James Tyler Kent, just in case you thought this is all very new ideas and just Jungian. This is from Kent's lectures on homeopathic philosophy, and this is the lecture on Sora. And I've paraphrased this so it's easier to understand. The internal state of man is prior to that which surrounds him. Therefore, environment is not the cause, it is only a sounding board. It only reacts upon and reflects the internal state. And then further in that paragraph, he says, man hates his neighbor, he is willing to violate every commandment. Such is the state of man today. All diseases upon the earth, acute and chronic, are representations of man's internal state.
Wow.
Internal state can be changed through people who are courageous enough to want to change it and who come to us for homeopathic treatment or other forms of therapy. And it's an opportunity to be of service to others on the individual level, but it also affects the collective. Every time we work on this level, the collective unconscious is affected. And even though it's small, if you think about it, if every person did the healing that these two women did, the world would be a different place.
100%.
So this is one of the great honors of being a homeopath, is to participate in this process. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening to me and my ideas and sharing the experience of these two women. And thank you, Eugenie, for all you do to share homeopathy with the world.
It's such a pleasure. I just want to make sure that everyone knows about your amazing book that is available as well and your
Ah, I have
website as
this.
well. You have got a slide there?
There we go.
Good. Excellent. Beautiful. Dream symbols and homeopathy. You said that book's been out for about 20 years, hey, because I've owned that book for
Yes.
over 10 years. And so brilliant, brilliant book. I highly recommend people purchase that. And the link is there as well from homeopathic.com. And yeah, you've got some beautiful links there as well. Your website isn't up there. So janetaracachetti.com.
It's
Oh,
janechicchetti.com,
it's just
and
Jane Chiquetti.
I'll have these links on the PDF that I'm going to send everyone.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Jane. That was so amazing and so inspirational. And you've just made me realize that I have some ancestral things that I need to heal as well, which I didn't previously think very much of. But when you were speaking the way that it was affecting me, I'm like, uh-oh, I probably need to go dig around there because I think because the South African Boer War, the British invaded and actually put the women and the children in concentration camps. And a lot of them died there because they couldn't get the men out of where they were hiding. And that's the only way that they could get them was to put the women and children in concentration camps. And so many of them died. And with the way that you was, and that's something that's not known. Very few people know about that. And that's something about my history. And I knew about it, but I never thought it affected me. And as you were talking, I just felt this like building up, and I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna have to go deal with this now. But like you said, like connecting with that and then us individually doing the work for the collective changes the collective. So yeah, wish me luck. Luckily, I have a good homeopath. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
Okay,
Thanks, Jane. Talk soon.
bye.
Bye.